What's up, guys? Well, all good things must come to an end, and that is what happened with my 8 game win streak. You play one game in a night, and you obviously are risking losing that streak, going 0-1, and that was the case with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think it was the right side, still the right play. They were the underdog at the underdog price, and they were in the game the whole time. They outshot and outhit and I think outface off. I'd have to look, but they statistically outplayed Arizona. Even though the shot discrepancy might have been a little bit because they were losing much of that game, but even so, by one goal, you're not just going to be desperately taking a bunch of bad shots. So they played well enough to win and just didn't get there. And Arizona continues this crazy streak of winning every game where Ingram is in net recently and losing everyone with Vejmelka. I think it's going back to like 5 or 6 games a piece for each goalie that has been the case, that they've only won with Ingram in net. It's wild. And I've been on the last 3, I think, Arizona games and won the first one, and since then lost the last 2 and was on the wrong side of their goaltender tandem in those games as well. Unfortunately, we move on to today, and unfortunately, I was also wrong on the NFL game last night. I thought the situation was a little bit better for Cincinnati. I didn't bet this game, but I lost some picks on it. I thought the situation was better on Cincinnati, but the late market move and line move was all over the Ravens, and I was considering changing my pick in the pools, and I'm just mad because I wish I did. Glad I did not bet though, for sure. All right, let's go to tonight. College football is in action with 2 Friday games. South Florida at UTSA. This is a little bit interesting, I would have to say. UTSA has gone down from -16 to -15.5 as a home favorite. They got 55% of the cash on them, though, but 64% of the tickets look like they're on South Florida as the underdog. So even though the cash discrepancy looks like it's on UTSA, it looks like the line has moved against them slightly. And my opinion in this game, it's not that strong, but I have an opinion at least against UTSA in this one. So UTSA, they are sitting at 6-0 in conference, so they do need to win this game to remain in the hunt to try to win this conference, the American Athletic Conference. They're tied with SMU and Tulane, all atop the conference at 6-0, and they, I believe, are third because they are third out of the tiebreaker scenario there between those 3 teams. So they do still need to win, but they're facing a pretty lowly, well, not lowly, but they're facing a South Florida team that's not in the mix to win the conference, at least. And up next, they have Tulane, who's leading the conference. So that is a huge game. They're going to need to beat Tulane. So they might have one eye looking ahead to that Tulane matchup, and they might get distracted as a result of it. So that's one thing that makes this situation not the best for UTSA. And for South Florida, they're at 5 wins, so they need 1 win to become bowl eligible. And you might say, well, yeah, their final game is a home game against Charlotte, and they're going to be favored in that game. So probably that's going to be the game that they're going to eye and have to win to gain the bowl eligibility. That's probably true, but does that mean they're just going to not pay attention to UTSA, who's one of the top teams in the conference? And they're also coming off a close win, an escape against Temple, which is kind of ridiculous. Temple, one of the worst teams in this conference in South Florida, didn't play well against them, so that might have them refocused a little bit as well. So I think the situation lines up better for South Florida in this one. You can maybe kind of excuse that Temple loss a little bit because they were coming off a barn burner of a game, a 9-point, very high-scoring loss to Memphis the game before that, who's one of the better teams in this conference. Maybe that South Florida just didn't show up, really didn't pay that much attention to Temple, and they had this bigger game up ahead too. So that's the way I look at that. The lean would be to South Florida in that one. And the other game I have less of an opinion on for sure. Colorado at Washington State. Colorado's got 52% of the tickets on them, but 68% of the cash as the road underdog. So they look like they have the cash discrepancy. The line looks like it has not moved. It is Washington State -4.5. Both of these teams are sitting at 4-6 and look unlikely to gain bowl eligibility. Even the team that wins this game is likely not going to win their final game because they both have really difficult games up. Both of these teams, I think, had really good starts and then completely fell off. Washington State won their first 4 and then lost 6 in a row. Colorado won their first 3 and since then have gone 1-6. So they're both in need of something. But Colorado, they're coming off three straight games against ranked teams, and they had the lead against Arizona at home and lost it right near the end, and that was their final home game as well, which I was on Colorado in that one. So that's maybe a tough way to lose that one. You're coming off two ranked teams, and you have another ranked team in Utah next. Although Colorado might still be focused just because, again, they need to win both of their remaining games to become bowl eligible. So that might still keep them focused, even though they're coming off a pretty heartbreaking loss, I would say. Whereas Washington State, they're coming off losses to Arizona State, Stanford, and California, three bad teams in this conference, and they've fallen to the last place team in this conference. I don't think Washington State's going to want to let that stand. That's pretty embarrassing. They're hosting a game in primetime, so I think they're probably going to want to show up for this one, even though they do have their big rival and conference leader Washington up next in their final game. This is Washington State's final home game of the season, so it's senior night in kind of like an isolated game here, and they are in the most embarrassed situation they have been all year, probably losing to all three of those other worst teams in the conference. So they're not going to want to lose to Colorado, I wouldn't think either. And they still want to become bowl eligible as well, even though it's highly unlikely having to face Washington in the final game. But even so, I think that's still a motivational factor to some extent. Very slightly moving to Washington State in that one, but it's not strong at all. Moving on, there's college basketball, and I think I'm just going to skip talking, even saying anything about college basketball. It's just, there's a big card. There are a lot of these tournaments that are in the Bahamas and in all these different places. I hate it, man. It's too much. It's handicapper overload, and I just can't get involved. And if I had gotten heavily involved in college basketball so far, I'd probably be losing money. So I like conference play to start, or regular season play to start. It's going to be right around the corner, and if I do happen to see like a good spot, I'll like pick some spots off on the board. But I'll get more heavily involved in college basketball certainly as the season progresses. NHL, there are 3 games, and I don't think I even want to talk about these. I think Toronto and Detroit are both in bad spots. What can you even say? Detroit's coming back from a loss in that Sweden game, which is, I don't get why all these leagues are playing these international games. It's just, whatever. And the Maple Leafs, I think they're coming off some big game too. They're coming off of beating the Canucks, which is a pretty big win as well. So I don't want to touch this game or either of the other ones really. Toronto's up from -170 to -171 on the money line. 95% of the cash, but 81% of the tickets. Who knows? I'm just pointing it out because I noticed that both of these teams are in like spots where I would kind of look to go against them both there. And Florida, at Anaheim. Florida's up from -138 to -157 on the money line. Is a huge road favorite. They have 58% of the tickets, but 56% of the cash on Anaheim. And in that one, I would probably look to go against Florida just slightly there. I would agree with not the money line move, because it looks like the money line move has gone way up on Florida, which is bizarre. But to go with where the cash discrepancy is, which looks like it's on taking the home dog in Anaheim. Florida certainly going to be somewhat of a public team because they have the better record, and they were just on a huge win streak. But that win streak ended with a close, tough loss at the Kings. So that's what they're coming off of. And the Ducks are coming off an 8-2, really bad-looking blowout loss, I think, to a good team. I think it was to Colorado or something. But whenever you lose 8-2 to anybody, I think that's going to refocus you a little bit. Whereas Florida's coming off a tough battle, like a more difficult loss there, more difficult game. So I would slightly lean to the Ducks there, but there's going to be nothing to really be said about that. NBA is where I'm going to have 2 plays, and let's. What do we want to do here? We'll get to the other leans first. So one lean that I have, I have opinions in a lot of these games, I would say. One is to go against the Celtics, but I'm not sure if I can quite get there with this one. They're at -7 on the road at Toronto, but I don't see the ticket or cash discrepancy yet on these. Looks like the line hasn't really moved either. Celtics, they don't really have a look ahead because they have Memphis next, and Memphis has been a struggling team, and Toronto is still like a divisional opponent, I believe, so they might still have some focus on Toronto just because they're in the same division. And Toronto, well, they're around 500, so I don't know. They're still like a fairly competitive team. Toronto's coming off a big game though as well, but they lost by double digits to the Bucks. And they're not traveling, they're staying at home, so that puts Toronto maybe, even though they're coming off a big game, I think it's not going to be that much of a factor. I think they're still in a better situation here because that was not a close loss, really, a bad loss. The Celtics are in the bad spot because they're coming off revenge against Philadelphia, a huge win where they won at Philly, and now they have to go up to Canada, up to Toronto. So I don't think it's a good spot for the Celtics there. I would only lean to Toronto in that one, +7, because the Celtics are in that letdown spot, and the Celtics did just house Toronto at home a couple games ago. On November 11th, they beat Toronto by 23 at home, so that's what we're looking at there. The lean there would be to Memphis. The lean would be to the Raptors. I would say it's even somewhat of a strong lean to some extent there. So that's the way I look at that one. What else we got here? Sacramento, I think, is in a bad spot because they just beat Cleveland and the Lakers. They're laying 7. They're up to 7.5 actually on the road at the Spurs. It looks like they're getting the move in the line and the cash discrepancy. 98% of the cash on the Kings, but only 89% of the tickets. So the market looks like it's driving the Kings up, and they have the cash discrepancy on them. So that's giving me a little hesitation on this one, but I think they're in a bad spot because they just beat Cleveland. They're on a 4-game win streak, but they just beat Cleveland, then they went on the road, won at LA in pretty convincing fashion in both of those games, really. Now they have to go to San Antonio, which is a not great San Antonio team. They might overlook them because they do have Dallas up next, who's a bigger opponent. And then they have New Orleans twice, Minnesota, Golden State, Clippers, Denver. So this is like a down spot in the schedule for the Kings for sure. And the San Antonio Spurs are off of losing by almost 40 to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which was on the road, and now they're coming back home and they're on a huge loss streak now. So this would be a play where I'm not actually going to be able to get there because the market read on this so just kind of confuses me a little bit. But I think the only way that I would look is to take the points with the Spurs here. Something's got to give. They're on a huge loss streak, and 6 games in a row they've lost, and now they've had 2 days off to prepare something and try to refocus themselves after that, whereas Sacramento only has 1 day off, and they're on a 4-game win streak. So this would be like a buy low, sell high situation where you're buying as pretty much as low as you could be on San Antonio after that almost 40-point loss, and selling high on Sacramento after a couple of big games there. So that's the way I would look at that. Orlando, Chicago, they're playing a repeat of a game that just happened between the two of them. 2 games in a row at Chicago. This one, Chicago's up from -1 to -2, but they have 82% of the cash, but 88% of the tickets. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is actually on the Magic, but the Magic dominated the previous game between these two, which was the last game these two teams played. The Magic had a gigantic lead, and Chicago actually made a roaring comeback right near the end to just fall short right near the end of it. So I don't know how to handle, those are kind of conflicting situations here, because I would want to say this would be then the zigzag where you'd want to lean to the Bulls, and I think I do lean to the Bulls slightly, and you're getting a little bit of line value maybe there because this opened at 1 and it's kind of somewhere around 2 now. They were 2.5 in the previous game, so because of the outcome of that first one, I think the line has moved down a little bit, so you might be getting a little bit of value on the Bulls, and they're the team that has the adjustments to make. But if they got completely blown out and that was the final score, I would like it more. But because they made that huge epic comeback right near the end just to fall short, you got to think like, are they going to have anything left after putting in that huge late effort? What are they going to have left in the tank? I don't know. I'm not totally sure about that one. So that's the way I look at that one. And then we got, what else we got here? Denver is at New Orleans. I don't know if that's really anything to look at there. Denver, they're road favorite in that one. I don't know if I have much to say situationally. They've gone up from -3.5 to -4.5 at home. 83% of the cash on them, but 68% of the tickets. We got Lakers, Trailblazers. I think I would lean to the Blazers slightly here. The Lakers have 71% of the tickets, but 91% of the cash are on the home underdog Trailblazers. And the Trailblazers, 8.5-point dog. It looks like the line hasn't really moved. The Lakers are coming off, what are they coming off? That game I just mentioned. They lost to the Kings, though. So I don't know. Now they go on the road. Maybe that's going to help the Lakers to refocus a little bit. So I don't know what to think about that one, really. Lakers did just beat Portland at home, but Portland was able to cover against them. It was fairly close. So maybe that actually might even make the Lakers take them seriously. I don't know. But the market read looks like it's on the home dog there. It looks like maybe the line is a little bit too heavy on LA. And Houston Rockets, I think, are in a pretty bad spot. But the market read is a little bit tough here, but I think this is a pretty strong lean to the Clippers. Rockets are a 6-point underdog. It's actually up to 6.5 now. It looks like 80% of the cash and tickets are both on the Clippers. Rockets, yeah, they're on a huge win streak here, so I think this is a bad spot for them for sure. They just beat Denver, the returning champions, and they've had 5 days off, and they've won 6 games in a row, which is all of their wins on the season. You just beat the returning champs, and now you have 5 days off, which might crush their momentum that they had. Now they have to go on the road to face the Clippers, but the Clippers are like a playoff team from last year, so that's one thing that gives me a little bit of hesitation. They might still be focused on the Clippers just because they've had that time off, and the Clippers are still a named team, even though they're struggling mightily. The books are telling you the Clippers are still the better team, but it also almost kind of looks like a trap in that case. So I think Houston is in the worst spot just because, yeah, they're in a letdown coming off that Denver win and having a big amount of time off, 4 days off, which might hurt their momentum. And they have the Lakers up next, and maybe they'll have an eye ahead on the Lakers more so than on the Clippers, even though I think the Rockets did they just beat the Lakers at home? I think they might have. I don't even remember. I think they did. It's still going to be a big game against the Lakers, though. Clippers need something. They've lost every game since they've gotten James Harden. They've lost 6 in a row, so this would be a buy low, sell high situation, actually. The Clippers need to turn around, and they just play the Nuggets, but they play them close, so that gives me some hesitation as well, because that's a big game. You went into elevation, played the Nuggets, and now you're coming out of elevation, but as far as like what the recreational bettors might see, they might look at this and see, well, the Rockets just beat Denver, the Clippers lost to Denver, and the Rockets are getting 6 points here, and they have the better record, so there's got to be value on the Rockets, right? So that might be the way recreational bettors will look at this point, even though, I don't know, I think in the back of their minds they do know, well, the Clippers have all these stars on their team, they are still the better team, so I don't know. There are a lot of kind of conflicting ways to look at this one, which is why I can't quite get there, but the lean would be to lay the points with the Clippers. Now, real quickly, the actual plays. Number 1 is going to be to go against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm taking my favorite team to take, the team that was so good to me last year and is 1-0 for me this year, barely. The Detroit Pistons. Cleveland is in a bad spot here. They're a 9-point home favorite. 65% of the tickets on them, but 93% of the cash going the other way on the Detroit Pistons. So I think there is a cash discrepancy in the market on the Pistons. And if you know how I handicap, man, you know that this is what I like. Cleveland, they're returning from a road trip, and yes, they are under 500, and people know that they're a better team than that. They've lost some games to some good teams. They've played a bunch of good teams. They've won games against good teams, actually more than they've lost, I would say. They're coming home from a 4-game road trip to the West Coast with only 1 day off, which I think is a bad spot, distracted spot. You come home from a long road trip, or not a long road trip, but a road trip that took you traveling to the Pacific time zone. 1 day off, and now you have to face the lowly Pistons. And up next, you have Denver, Philadelphia, Miami, the Lakers. And it goes on. So this is a completely down spot in the schedule, even though their last road game was against a bad team as well, Portland Trailblazers. But you're coming home from a road trip, so that makes this almost like kind of a sandwich. And you have a look ahead to the returning champ Denver Nuggets up next. I think Cleveland's in a very distracted spot here. They have a bigger game up next. I think they might look past Detroit. They might not be totally focused on Detroit here. That's play number 1. Detroit Pistons +9, and Detroit, I don't know, what are they off of? They're off of a loss, probably. They've lost everything. Yeah, they lost to the Atlanta Hawks, so they're on a huge losing streak, actually. They've lost a ton of games in a row. 9 straight losses, I think. So they were 2-1, and now they're 2-10. Nobody's going to want anything to have to do with Detroit here, but I do. We're buying low on Detroit in this situation as well, and it's a bad spot for Cleveland. It's one of the worst spots on the board, I would say, so that's number 1. And if you know the way I handicap, you're going to know already number 2, which I see a nice market read situation here. 76ers, I'm going against them. They've gone down from -2 to -1. It was actually the Hawks -1 at one point, so it's kind of flip-flopping the favorite here. 76ers look like they're Still, the line is moving against them, though. They've still, at this point, gone down from -2 to -1 on the road. They have 71% of the tickets, but 69% of the cash looks like it's on the Atlanta Hawks. Cash discrepancy on the Hawks. This is a play against the 76ers mostly because they had the big game against the Celtics. So they've now lost 2 games in a row. You can kind of excuse the second Indiana loss because they were playing the team that they just played. So it was a zigzag for Indiana, and Indiana was able to adjust and get the best of them. And they were, I think, definitely looking ahead to the Boston game, a much bigger game. Now they played that game 2 days ago. They lost it, and yeah, they get out of Dodge, get out of home, which might break the negative momentum they have, from those 2 losses. But that was a big game, man. Big loss. You might be in like a defeated spot now, hungover situation here where the Celtics just regained control of the division because you just lost to them. And if you had beaten them, you would have maintained control of the division or gotten it back. I forget. I think they might have been tied going into that game, something like that. So big loss. This is a hangover / letdown spot for the 76ers. Going to Atlanta. They might not pay too much attention to Atlanta. And they do have Brooklyn up next, who's playing decent basketball, at least in their conference. I think they're a divisional opponent, so they might maybe even have one eye looking ahead there because Atlanta has not been playing that well. So I don't know how focused you're going to be on the Hawks team there. Hawks are coming off a loss to the Knicks. They're sitting at 6-5. They're a playoff team from last year. They have some stars on the team, but I don't know if you're going to be that focused on them. They're staying at home, and they have the same amount of rest, at least one day off. Coming off that loss, I think they're going to bounce back. They don't really have bigger games on the horizon here. You have the 76ers coming into your house. I think you're going to be focused on them. The line move looks like it's on them, so a lot of information in the NBA there. Those are all those leans that I have there. The actual plays as of now are going to be the Atlanta Hawks +1 and the Detroit Pistons +9. Got to get out of here. Have a good one, man.